Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, brought to you by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. I'm Randy Johnston with my co-host Brian Tankersley. We'd like to talk to you today about some Thomson Reuters products that have been released to the market. Some have been out a while, but they are for advisory services. And particularly, we'd like to discuss Ready to Advise and Practice Forward. So those are the two basic frameworks that we want to work from. So Brian, you and I have talked for some time about advisory services. And while there's much talk about advisory services, what do you see them being?
Well, realistically, there are again two major groupings that we kind of put them into. The first one is going to be the primary services, again, the business and the personal planning, and in those, again, you're just managing the tax and the business situations that these folks have to deal with. But then there are also primary, secondary, and tertiary services. So it could be business valuation, it could be a wide range of different things in here to help people solve those unique problems. Because, again, maybe you don't see M&A transactions very often, but I guarantee you, for most people that have worked in their family businesses for 30 years, you probably see a lot more M&A than they ever will. And so it's I think it's important to consider that they need these services. They're highly valued. They want this advice. And so, again, finding a framework where you feel comfortable and you kind of backstop yourself and, setting up the tool sets you need to do this is, I think, a really important thing. Because, again, when you have helped, again, when working with somebody's business is very much like dating their daughter. And when you have done this for a while, there's a level of trust that exists that, where they need you to help them solve some of these problems. And again, I think that in many cases, we've been letting a lot of people that are much less competent solve these problems because we didn't know how to set up structures to do it.
Yeah, in fact, we'll talk more about the structures and platforms, but Practice Forward has been around for a while and it has been framed so you can help your clients succeed and get paid for your value and really help you just enjoy accounting again. That's part of what that platform does for you. But by the same token, there is a framework and Ready to Advise. So we see that there's a lot of opportunity out there. And you are right when you think about you may not see some of these things very often. That's why I actually like you to build relationships for tertiary services where you can do concierge referral. And the fact of the matter is that I believe that where you have relationships with your clients, you are highly valued and they desire advice from you because they know they can trust it, that there's really not a sales motivation. So, I think advisory then leads to opportunities too, Brian. So, what type of opportunities do you see advisory having in practices?
Well, from a recruiting perspective, most of the young people entering the profession that I've talked to in the last 5 or 10 years really want to do advisory. Okay. And so you can't use that same, you need to have ways to let them get involved in this and help them see some of the secret sauce that you put on these things. You also, again, they also need to understand that a big part of the job, like you just said, is to leverage your expertise and your network of experts to solve problems, because the thing that you're delivering every time is trust. You're delivering the fact that this person is not going to sell them down the road and give them bad advice. And if they do, then you're going to fix it. So that's a big deal here. When we've seen many times with advisory that CAS in particular is the leading information of performance coming out of things, and you're going to see things doing the CAS that you will not see if you're just looking at the stuff 10 days after the end of the month. You'll see those excess charges flow in through the bank feeds, and you'll say, they're spending a lot of money right now. What's happening here? And so you'll see that earlier than anybody else. But again, it gives you a lot of opportunities there where you can see need for other niche services that are transactional instead of ongoing, like business structure, business valuations, again, or M&A. So there's a lot of great opportunity in here that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, to me, I like that it lets you leverage your accounting expertise and your network of experts to deliver unique services to the clients for your firm. And frankly, it gives your team members opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. Well, there's so much AI centric content out there. And Brian, you and I have talked about, what is the right way to think about this. And in other accounting technology labs, we've talked about the frontier models, the Claudes and the open AI chat GPTs and Copilot 365s. We've done quite a number of episodes on that. And I think those are still pretty accurate. But, why do we have to worry about controlling AI in accounting? You and I probably come from the same, uh, I'll say, portion of cloth on this. We're probably cut from the same cloth. But I'd like to actually hear your current thinking today about controlling AI.
I think we have to worry about where the data is being used and how and what the privacy is that's going on with it. And again, how that data might happen. I actually just switched to a chat GPT for Teams account so that my data would hopefully be less visible in chat GPT. I will say also that in general, the AI will do a great job of summarizing things like you would have pulled out of an encyclopedia as a kid, or like, again, summarizing large documents or other things like this. But we can never forget the experience you and I had when in February of 2023, when we were sitting there with the CPA Practice Advisor Thought Leader Group in the Witham Conference Room in New York. And we ran a bio on Doug Sleater, and it said he was dead. I immediately texted a picture of it to him, and he laughed at it. Okay. But I'm saying that because this aberrant behavior that happens with the AI models, where sometimes it just makes things up out of whole cloth. I don't think you're ever going to get to the level of trust that you have with your 20-year team members, of them getting the right answer that you get, out of the AI tools, just because I think they've made so many epic mistakes over the years that have caused people issues. But it can solve a lot of problems very quickly. And again, with review by humans, you can really productize a lot of these things.
Yeah. So you're saying, in the words of Monty Python, you're not dead yet?
I'm not dead yet.
Indeed, you're not. Well, we do and have taken the position that if you're using AI, that you want to have accountants monitor the output. And we know agents are changing that game too. But, in the big picture, the public models, just like you said, you just changed to Teams at hoping you might protect your data. By the way, I probably can make the argument it still won't be protected very much, right? But it's
Well, I'm
more
also
than a free model or a personal model. Okay, I get all those positions, but the bottom line here is we actually have a fiduciary responsibility as accounting professionals to protect client data. It's in the standards, and I am appalled about the number of accountants that are not protecting client data, either knowingly or unknowingly, which is really disturbing to me. But in large language platforms, that data is very hard to protect. But in private platforms, client confidentiality is protected, just like in an alternate accounting technology lab that we've recorded for you on the 2025 tax and accounting innovations. We talked about the privacy of a number of these products. So privacy matters. to me. I think it matters to you, Brian, at the risk of putting words in your mouth, and I think it matters to a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that gets me is, I remember taking the ethics exam I had to after I passed the exam in November of 92. And one of the things I distinctly remember was that it said, you will not disclose confidential client information. It doesn't say unless there's a great opportunity or unless it makes a great app work or anything like that. It says you will not. And I think that's one of the red lines that I think we've got to watch very carefully as a profession, because if we're found to be the source of a lot of leaking data, the level of trust we get is going to go down into the world of the used car salesman and other professions like that where we don't want to go.
Yeah, and there's a number of platforms out there right now that are hoovering up data, as I like to use the British word there because it just sounds so cool. They're sucking all the data they can get because they've done all the public data and now they want the private data.
And it sucks. It just sucks. Sorry, I couldn't let that pun go through the strike zone, Randy.
Well, I tried to give you a big, softball to hit there, and you did a pretty good job at it. But, when it comes to AI, we do want you to leverage known and effective business cases that are structured to be, compliant with regulations and legal approaches. And, if you're in a private platform that's got a little more control around it, you can get greater accuracy and you can minimize your hallucinations, which we think are good. Further, if you're working in models, and you and I have looked at a lot of these different models now, where the analysis in the solution is quite good, it minimizes the time it takes you to construct something for the client. And in effect, you as accounting professionals can use your skills to identify and prioritize solutions for clients. So anytime I can get you to think about using a platform that's already been configured to optimize accounting professional work, I'm kind of all in on that. Now, I didn't say we can't use things that are general tools, but I do think that the language of accounting leveraged with AI is a wonderful thing.
And yeah, and so given that we're in the trust business, generally in accounting, that people trust us and they trust that when we say something, it's going to be right. One of the dangers with AI that has not been properly vetted, or that is, where we've not reviewed the results and compared those to our expectations with it, is that we're going to give bad AI advice. And we're going to get into one of those I refer to as an emperor's new clothes moment, where you're standing out there saying, yeah, Doug Sleater is dead. And then suddenly Doug shows up and says, no, I'm not. I'm here. I'm just fine. And I think we've got to acknowledge that we can use AI in the profession, but we've got to be very judicious and we've got to check it and make sure it's right, because there is no easy way to get your reputation back and get that trust back once you've made those critical errors with AI.
Yep, that makes great sense. Well, I've got another couple of topics I'd like to discuss today. I'd like to turn our attention for a minute, Brian, to what clients want. So if you're thinking about advisory services, what do you believe that clients are really looking for?
I think, you have to remember that the CPA client relationship is never about you, the CPA. It is always about them, the client, and what their evolving needs are. Sometimes the problems that they need to have solved are not things that are normally in your wheelhouse. I remember there was a guy I used to work for 25 years ago, and he said that one of his things he did with one of his super high net wealth clients was he went out and helped this little old lady buy a Cadillac about every two or 3 years when she decided it was time for a new car. The thing here is that you can't always put the advice that your clients need or want in the simple box of, I do tax, I do write up, I do client accounting, I do advisory. You can't put it in that box. They need somebody to make things that are causing them stress go away. And so this, again, it could be children's education, it could be business succession, it could be, I've made so much money, I can't imagine my children will ever spend it in their lifetimes. Therefore, let's give it away. Or maybe we need to preserve long-term wealth to protect a disabled child or grandchild or something like that. So meeting those needs, and again, figuring out how to solve those unique challenges, but also, again, maximizing profit, minimizing risk, and again, making things happen that person has on their list of things they want to have accomplished that they don't know how to do.
Yeah, that's actually the real trick on it. It's personal planning and it's business planning. How do we accomplish the things that are most important to you? How can we assist you to get that done? To me, that's a real advisory service. And, many clients have similar needs, so you can actually get some leverage there. Well, that turns me then, I think, Brian, to platforms. Now, again, in my world of thinking about this today, I've only identified about a half a dozen advisory platforms that are out there. And, you might think, well, I can use my own models. I've seen firms try to do this. They get an area of expertise somewhere and they build their Word documents and their spreadsheets and they have a lot of expertise in the area. But see, to me, that's a bit more of an advisory service that's very specialized and it's not whole client centric. And while I clearly respect the thoroughness and the creativity and the inventiveness of many of the accounting professionals that I've met, it's really hard in a firm to leverage the skill of a few people and apply it to all the clients that have the needs as I see it. And, further, transferring specialized knowledge is challenging. You think about how we follow accounting technology together and how much you learned that I don't know and how much I learned you don't know. And we try to share it with each other. But
When we're exposed to the same thing, you and I come away with different things.
absolutely. And so, I am very cognizant that it's hard to get leverage. AI is helping us get leverage and so forth. But why would you use a platform rather than your own models? Any other ideas on that?
I think generally that I think the platforms do a better job of putting a bow around things, okay, and generally in putting things together. And again, when you go on your own, you're, the it. I think of going on your own very much like I think of the streaking scene in the movie Old School, where Will Ferrell runs out and says, "We're going streaking," and a party, and he is buck ass naked, and off he goes. Okay. I actually, you may have seen the link. Chris Gaetano actually linked this in an article that he got from me a while back. But I mentioned that to you here because the things you can do on your own work until they don't. And when they don't, it's not a good thing. Okay. That coffee the next morning in the student union is just quite different after you've gone streaking the night before and somebody saw you streaking. Okay. And so I mentioned that to you here because the platforms give you some bumpers around them to kind of protect you from unexpected things. They give you some protection in that they're designed knowing that you can't get things wrong. So they're designed with guardrails around the aberrant behavior or, again, the problematic behavior that the AI models get. Also, again, we don't want, you know, we want the financial information to get in there. And if we've got integrations or tool sets in there to ingest that information, work with it, I think you generally can avoid the death by keying that many of us experienced in the late 90s, early 2000s.
So, just like earlier, I can't get it out of my head. Boogity, Ray Stevens' song, "He Ain't Wearing No Clothes." Because I was a photographer on college campuses in the days of streaking, and I have some unique pictures, we shall say. That's
Well,
probably TMI for our audience, isn't it?
well, I will just say generally, the what I'm really trying to say with that, if I wanted to say it in a more elegant way, is there are things that you can't unsee, so don't show them.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, being a little more serious on this, the Practice Forward platform from Thomson Reuters has been around for a bit. If I understand it today, they're pushing 300 internal and client-facing templates. So they have proposal templates and pricing calculators and others that allow you to do personalized consulting. And they also have a connection to other forward-thinking practitioners that are also trying to offer similar services. So I think that is a benefit of the Practice Forward
Oh,
platform.
it absolutely is. And I will tell you, somebody, whether I worked in a big firm or in a small firm, it's always good to have that person in that community where you can say, I think I'm losing my mind, but this is what I'm seeing, and this is what the related thinking is from it. And again, having that gives you the confidence to take actions a lot of times that you might not take on your own.
Yeah, and this platform has a proven sales process for engaging clients to define service offerings and pricing. And so you can standardize support delivery and service delivery, which I think are good. And it also helps with transitioning clients to the advisory relationship. So that part of the platform is, I think, quite good. But the newly announced product for this year was the Ready to Advise platform. Now, I know, Brian, you saw this initially at Synergy in 2024, and you were so excited about it. I recall I was actually traveling and you called me while I was in Atlanta because you had to tell me right away what was going on. It's like, yeah, that is pretty cool, Brian. Well, that product is out and Ready to Advise can work on finding relevant tax strategies with client-ready reports in an AI-guided advisory delivery methodology. And the whole goal of this platform is to save you time and enable delegation. Coincidentally, it will increase revenue for your firm, and it should client relationships as we see it. But Ready to Advise is really for tax and accounting firms who are facing challenges around scaling advisory services that have really limited expertise and bandwidth and need to communicate their unique value approach. So, again, you've seen this for a while, but what other comments might you make and final thoughts on advisory services, perhaps using a platform like Ready to Advise and Practice Forward? What's your thoughts there, Brian?
I think I think generally that you need to get into advisory if you're going to. And I think it is never going to be comfortable. Okay. It is that with the first engagement is always going to be uncomfortable. Now, the real truth here is that many of you have already been doing advisory engagements, but just not getting paid for them for years. So this really gives you some structure and gives you again a platform that will help you make these engagements more replicatable and help you manage the risk associated with them. And again, help you do more effectively. And so I would just say that the advisory opportunity is probably not going to get better than it is today. And so I think it's time to get into it. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to learn new things, God forbid. Okay. And you're going to have to try new things. But I think it's going to help you and your clients make the most of your practice and their businesses. And ultimately, I think that's what we're all in it for anyway.
That's so well said. I'm not even going to try to put a further bow on it. So that being the case, we appreciate you listening in to today's Accounting Technology Lab. Brian and I look forward to having you listen to us again very soon. Have a fine day.